live. So if you do want to share this or the video with your Facebook group first, feel free to do that, and then we can, officially begin in like a minute or so.
All right, sure. I was actually trying to share the earlier link that I saw posted, but I think it wasn't set to public, was it?
Yeah,
I couldn't see the share button on Facebook.
I don't know like how to do this because it's technically public. So I'm thinking it could, some people are saying like it might be because what do you say? The group itself is private, but I haven't done this enough to be able to say.
Okay, yeah, it might be that, yeah.
Let me just. I need to also get this in my group.
Sure.
Okay. And I'll also put this in the entrepreneurship group. Just because I think the whole conversation around all the different government policies might be relevant to them.
Sure.
Okay, there we go. We are set.
Awesome.
So, you were kind of telling me, it's been kind of busy for you, but how has the whole restrictive movement been for you?
Well, for my side personally, it actually started out a little bit slower actually, because there was actually my wife's grandmother actually passed away, just around the time of the restricted movement. Yeah, so I was actually out of the house, actually braving the roadblocks and all that, just get all the arrangements all sorted out.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's pretty intense to have to go through. Right, I mean during this time as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I think life still goes on for a lot of people. There will still be new babies born. There will be deaths occurring from various causes, etc. Yeah, and personal finance that goes on as well. Just everyday fact of life. I'd say.
Yeah, and I guess for those who don't know you, I usually I refer to you as Steve. So seeing your full name it's really weird.
Steve is fine.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us the people watching, who you are, what you do, and anything else that you might think it'd be interesting for people to know.
Sure. Yeah, just a 1 minute pitch, I guess, of myself. So I'm Steve, or Steven. So I'm actually a licensed financial planner with Wealth Advantage Advisory. I also ran one of the popular personal finance in Malaysia. My background was actually not in finance. My bachelor's was actually in IT. Actually, I majored in programming. And then what actually happened was that after a number of years in the IT industry, life took a different turn actually. So I actually left my job. Got married, went for honeymoon, and came back jobless. What a way to start a marriage, right? And then just at that point of time, I was actually praying, looking for a vocation of where to go towards. And I actually headed into the personal finance space actually. So when I had to complete my CFP certification, it was always an interest area. I've actually been investing since my teens. So before I was 18, I was actually investing using my dad's account. And then, after that, started getting exposed to various other instruments. I started way back with unit trust back in the heydays in the 90s, where just about everything you bought seemed to go up by double digits, if you remember those days. Then went into shares. Then after that went into starting with Bursa. Then after that went into US shares. Right now, yeah, pretty diversified actually. So looking at everything from bonds, shares, money markets, managed portfolios, crypto, peer-to-peer lending, a little bit of everything actually. Yeah, commodities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we have extra time, I would love to pick your brains on see what you think the big opportunities are right now. But let's make sure we get through what we said we will get through first.
All right, sure.
So, one of the things that you were talking, or when we were talking before we started going live, was the whole idea of cash flow management, right? And I think this is probably a term that most people haven't really thought about because usually when you think about investing or when you think about business, you always talk about your assets, your liabilities, and you think people think that they're rich because their assets are a lot higher than their liabilities, right? But then I guess especially in real estate, there's this whole term that goes around that says you're asset rich but you're cash poor, right? So given all that, can you tell us more about cash flow management and why is that important?
I think the starting from some people statistics, which a number of you I'm sure have heard, that more than 3/4 of Malaysians don't even have 1,000 ringgit actually set aside for emergency savings. And even right now, with the movement control order in place, especially those who aren't getting a fixed income, you're beginning to see the impact of that as well, where there's a worry that there's not enough money to actually cover essential goods actually, food expenses, a roof over your head, etc. Yeah. So if you're actually looking at in terms of, you can actually look at it two ways. One is in terms of emergency savings or funds. So, the general rule of thumb that you typically would hear is to have 6 months worth of emergency savings, or, at the very least, 3 months if you're actually single with totally no dependents. But the thing right now is that, looking at how the restricted movement is in order. And I think the keyword of the day that we're actually looking at is actually containment, actually. So initially, I think after the outbreak actually happened in China, people weren't too worried at that point of time because basically China had the authority and the means, and within actually a span of a number of months, the containment was pretty much in effect, and you saw the curve being flattened and people resuming daily life to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, you go to China, to Shanghai, you see the thermal scanners everywhere, but people have already returned to work, and business is starting to pick up once again. But then if you actually extrapolate that towards the rest of the world, actually, and we see that in a lot of other countries, people are just not prepared for that. So, a disruption of, 6 months will be really devastating for most people. Even if we're talking about 3 months or even 1 month, a lot of people would be having a lot of difficulties with their cash flow. So, that's why the various initiatives are actually also meant to, help make sure that, that at least essentials are being taken care of. Employers in Malaysia, you can't just fire someone immediately. You can't force people to take unpaid leave. Yeah. So that all sorts it's kind of just to make sure that cash flow is still proceeding smoothly for people.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess for those, we'll talk about those who might not have the money afterwards. But for those who have that's the savings of, let's say, 3 months, and their current situation is they kind of have a job, but it's kind of unstable. What are your suggestions to them from a cash flow management perspective?
I think would be that we may want to err on the side of being conservative, that movement control, or at least a slowdown in business might be something that's longer, and certain businesses would have already been looking at cutting staff off or non-essential work. especially with the extension of the movement control order. So I think as we just need to be conservative in the sense that, focus more on essentials, food you need, medicine, your various bills, household needs, so it's just to avoid things like panic buying or hoarding or, being bored at home and you're just, online shopping. And, they make these interfaces, online shopping, just so easy at the click of a button.
Yeah.
Get whatever you need actually. At the flip side of the coin is that you don't want to be to the extent where you're at home just eating bread every day, or maybe bread's not a good example since bread might be a scarce commodity at some point, but not to the extent where you're totally deprived. You can still have a few luxuries, but don't just go overboard with it, I would say, in general, or in terms of personal cash flow management.
Yeah. So from a cash flow management perspective, then, I mean, without revealing any numbers for yourself, like how would you say your cash flow, or how have you changed your cash flow management pre this whole lockdown compared to what's happening right now?
Not much change, to be honest, on my side. If you're talking about general guidelines, your expenses should not be more than 60% of your income. That means expenses should be less than 60% of your net income. On my side, I was probably doing somewhere around 40% expenses. So it's just to actually keep it at that level. And, sometimes it's a lot of little things which add up actually. For example, if you're talking about personal basis, people are surprised when, I basically turn on the aircon, every day actually. And yet my electricity bill is, somewhat like about 50 ringgit a month. So, it's just about, keeping the temperature, the conducive level, like say at 24 degrees, so you still enjoy the comfort of the aircon and yet it doesn't, burn a hole in your wallet with the utility bill.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one expense of mine that's probably going to go up really like a lot this month. Just because, normally I'm at the office, so the AC is not on. But now that I'm working from home, like AC is always plugged in. And then, because I'm also cooking all the time now at home, because usually I would just be kind of out eating with friends or just getting something around the office. And now having to, make my own food, then that also takes more electricity. So it will be, I'm kind of curious to see what will happen once all of this is over and like what that bill looks like.
Yeah, keep me updated on that for you.
Yeah. So I guess so we kind of talked about the people who, let's say, are already kind of in a position where they were already in a sense well off, right? And those who already have money in the bank kind of still have a job, so their days are just it's just more of a nuance, right? How about for those people who have been laid off, and like you mentioned, are the ones that maybe have 2,000 in savings right now? Like, is there anything that they can do, or is there anything that the government's already introduced that that can help them?
So basically, you want to take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there in order to ease your cash flow.
Yeah.
So certain things like the very small territorium and with the announcement that it's all automatic, that should also help ease cash flow. And I know there's been a lot of questions being thrown about should you not take up the 6 months loan moratorium, for example. While it differs from person to person, while it would also be affected by factors like what would be the details from each bank, and the number of banks have already begun to release details of how they're handling that. It also affects as well whether you're taking a conventional or Islamic loan actually, because if conventional, you're actually looking at the interest being charged and the interest is being compounded. While if an Islamic loan is actually not interest actually. In fact, how it's actually structured as, for example, you're buying a property and the typical loan that you have in Malaysia is the BBA Islamic loan. So it will actually be viewed as a surplus profit rate, and that means that the interest is actually not compounded. But if you were to try to simplify, the key thing would be that if you need the cash flow, then go ahead and take all the various opportunities that are out there. If you actually don't need the cash flow, then you should actually still continue to proceed to opt out of the moratorium. Opt out of the various things that would affect you in the longer term, and just keep things the way they are, because your cash flow is sufficient anyway for yourself.
Okay. I mean, so we kind of mentioned a few different things there. And honestly, I got lost because I think there were a few different things happening. So let's actually break it down a bit. Let's
Sure.
talk about the whole I can't pronounce the word. The 6 months loan thing.
Moratorium, or you can just use a loan deferment. That's the language that
Okay.
the Bank Negara has been using anyway. Loan deferment.
Okay, loan deferment. What exactly does that mean?
All right. So basically, from April, all loans would actually be deferred. So this would, the key loans for most people would be their vehicle or the hire purchase loan. For business, would be and the only sort of exclusion for that would actually be will still continue to be charged unless payment numbers at interest term loan, which actually is still lower than if you're actually a late payer for your credit card, you're probably being dinged around 15 to 18% kind of range. Yeah, so 13% is still lower than the amount that you will be charged. Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, I guess a quick takeaway is if you have credit card debt right now, this is probably a good opportunity for you to have it all consolidated into a term loan of some sort and get it charged a lower rate, right?
Yep, you could get it consolidated, charged at a lower rate. I guess it would kind of depend on whether are you carrying any other debt as well. Because if you're behind in your credit card debt, you might be behind other debts as well. So if you have a load of all other debts, then other options to consider would be like AKPK, where the rate is somewhat around 8%. If you actually work within the AKPK framework, actually for your loans to be all consolidated. And once it's consolidated, it means that you're not going to get your legal loan sharks, calling you out, trying to chase you for payments and all that. Of course, as with everything, there's pros and cons as well. You would actually be limited, to the number of credit cards that you can hold. A record would actually show up in your secrets report, for example. So yeah, that's basically every option that one makes. There's always pros and cons for each decision actually.
Yeah. Okay, so when we say loan deferment, does it literally just mean like you just don't have to pay for the next 6 months, or are there like any like terms and conditions, or does interest continue to get charged and you just don't have to actually pay that interest? How does that work?
All right, so you will basically charge for the interest, because the interest portion will actually be still charged during this 6-month period. Most banks have actually come out to say that they will all be automatic, and most banks have actually come out to say that they're actually giving until the end of April, actually, so April 30th, to call your bank. For most online hotline or call center number that you can actually call in to opt out. Certain banks are also allowing that opting out process to be done online through the various online banking portals as well. So basically, if you choose to opt out, then you can actually opt out for on a per loan basis actually. So for example, if you have multiple loans within the same bank or multiple different type of loans, you can actually pick and choose which ones that you want to opt out, and which ones that you actually want to pay. So the thing for note is the way also that the interest is being calculated as well. So for example, if you're actually looking at a property loan for most, how that is actually based on a table, years or then the capital owing to the bank or financial institution makes up part of that payment only. And in later years, then more gets paid to the capital and less to the interest. We can imagine with home loan that especially if it's you are actually all your payments will actually mostly go to the interest actually. So imagine if you stop paying the interest for a period of 6 months, and even more so the conventional loan that's further compounded as well. It will actually either increase the amount that you are or increase the amount of money repayments that you would need to make.
Yeah, that's actually quite, I guess, that's quite dangerous, right? Because just kind of repeating kind of what you said there, if you are pretty early on in your home buying journey in the sense of like, or paying off your home, most of their payments, like let's say 85% of it is all interest, right? So in this scenario, these people or this whole loan deferment thing doesn't really help you really, because most of that, the 85% that's interest is still something that gets charged. And if you don't pay it now, then it just, the interest actually gets charged on top of that interest, right? Which can actually lead to a much tougher time in the future. And so in that scenario, like if you can pay it off, you suggest continue to pay it off, right? Just don't hold that off.
Yeah. So there's a couple of myths that. So the first I've heard that things going people to hey, it's the banks are at a loss. There's this 6-month deferment. Just go ahead and take out all the money, and you can use the money to invest. But whenever you're investing, you're carrying on additional risks. So I think the investor would know. You're taking on more risk and a period of time where markets are increasing, are very volatile as well. So it also begs the question at yourself, how confident are you and what instruments are you going to be able to use to make sure that, the amount that you can earn would be more than the amount that you have to pay back on the interest side. So it's kind of like the question, if normally you were investing just with normal cash that you get, say, from your paycheck or etc., you haven't been investing on a margin or using a contra account, it may not be a good idea to suddenly dip in and use money that you actually have to pay interest on to try to invest, because the impact of that would be significantly higher risk.
Definitely. Okay. So that's kind of the whole loan deferment thing. What other government reliefs have been introduced that people should be aware of?
Well, before I jump into that, just to cover a little bit on the hire purchase side. So basically, different countries also have different ways how they actually calculate the hire purchase or the vehicle loan. So for example, if you use a vehicle loan calculator in another country compared to Malaysia, you may actually get different numbers actually. Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that as well. So also the vehicle loan in Malaysia is actually based on a simple interest rate. So the impact of that would be less minimal if you had a choice between deferring payment on your car and your house, and you just needed that extra cash flow, then it would make sense to defer the payment on your car loan because the impact of that would be lesser as a simple interest compared to your housing loan. It remains to be seen, clearly stated out how all banks are actually going to treat that for the hire purchase loan actually. I've actually heard that certain banks are actually just going to defer the whole thing, and that amount, the interest, would actually be, in a sense, waived actually. So if that's actually the scenario where it's totally deferred and waived, then yeah, it totally makes sense to defer the payment. Yeah. But if not, then it would actually still make sense if your cash flow is the extra cash flow that you might gain to just continue on with your regular car loan repayments at that point of time.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Like if they do waive it, that'd be huge, right?
Yeah.
Because
Other things, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
Oh yeah. So you were going back to your earlier question where you were asking on, what are some of the other things that will be helpful on the cash flow side as well.
Yeah.
The first was the earlier announcement actually, where from your EPF contribution, instead of 11% on the employees side, you could actually opt for 7% contribution. So basically, you contribute less to EPF. So again, this is more of a matter of cash flow, whether you need that cash flow or not. And also, if your income level is actually below 4,000 ringgit a month, actually, it might actually make sense to actually still contribute the full 11% from the employee side. So this will actually help you for your tax relief for the year of assessment 2020, which you'll file next year. So for the year assessment 2020 tax relief, they have actually broken down the tax relief that you can get between the EPF and the life insurance portion. So the max amount of EPF contribution eligible for tax relief is 4,000 ringgit. So if you actually want to maximize out the 4,000 ringgit and your pay is below 4K, you actually would need to contribute the full 11% actually into your EPF for your employee contribution side.
Okay.
And then the final one that we're looking at would be the EPF account 2 withdrawal for 12 months of 500 ringgit. So, there's been quite a bit of noise that, some people are feeling that, hey, it's my own money, and withdrawing would actually affect my own retirement years, because that EPF money is actually meant for retirement. But with that said, if that 500 ringgit is gonna make sure that your cash flow is sustainable for this period of time, then yeah, by all means, take it when you need it.
Yeah. So going back to the EPF account too, I mean, as someone who doesn't or wasn't born here and don't really qualify for any EPF, what does that mean?
So basically, you're looking at your whenever you contribute to EPF, 70% actually goes into account 1, and 30% of your contributions go into, this is both for the employer and the employee contribution. Most withdrawals can only be made from account 2. Let's say that you want to withdraw to buy a property or to help you pay your property loan, for medical emergencies, or for tertiary education. Yeah, so all this would actually be normally from account 2. Your EPF account 1 typically would only be able to be withdrawn for EPF members investment schemes, or MIS in short. So that would be actually an amount that you can actually withdraw above the certain percentage of the minimum basic savings that requires, and that can actually be invested actually into things like approved unit trusts or ETFs. Yeah, EPF actually announced an online electronic MIS withdrawal, so you can actually do it online as well through the IF. And the other major withdrawal is if your EPF has more than $1 million ringgit, you can actually go ahead to withdraw any amount at any time.
Okay. And when it comes back to, or going back to the whole contribution thing, so let's usually, because with EPF, companies will also match it, right, to a certain amount. So does that mean if you were to go from 11% to 7%, that companies will only match the 7% then?
No, the reduction in the EPF contribution rate would only affect the employer side actually. So the employee side would be as low as 12%, which is the minimum mandated amount. But certain companies will give higher than 12%, say 14, 16, 18, etc. And the rate would still continue as usual. So no change in that.
Okay, so it's really in the sense of like the only, or if you aren't, or if you're just trying to max out your tax relief, for tax year 2020, then you want to stay in the 11%. Otherwise, taking 7% is not that bad of an idea then.
Yeah, that's right. And also if you're actually looking at the historical returns of EPF, long-term 30-year historical returns, you're looking about 5.7% per annum. Last year, of course, the EPF returns were lower at 5.45% when it's on conventional simpanan Sharia. So if you do withdraw with the investing that money, then you have to be pretty certain that you can earn higher than that prevailing EPF rate do at least 5.5. I probably wouldn't even opt to withdraw it unless you're pretty certain that you can get something that gives you, say, 7-8% kind of range. Then it may make sense.
Okay. Awesome. So I think those are probably the three main reliefs that the government have introduced in Malaysia, right?
For individuals, those will be the key ones actually.
Okay, and are there any major reliefs for businesses or small businesses?
Mainly, we're seeing that there's actually been a discount on utility bills. It's actually given for residential households as well, but at 2%, you probably won't really feel that much of a difference in your utility bill. It helps, I guess. But for certain domestic customers in certain areas, there's actually been 6 sectors which have been identified: hotel operators, travel agencies, airlines, shopping malls, convention centers, and theme parks. So they're actually being given a 15% discount actually, which should help reduce the cost of their utility bills as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they would actually be for the various businesses. They would also be entitled for their loan deferment or moratorium as well.
Okay. So we actually have a few different listeners, also out of Malaysia, primarily in Singapore. And from my understanding, Singapore also just announced a few different things right before we went live. So Reggie was actually, busy listening to it because he's actually a Singaporean still. So Reggie, if you don't mind, kind of just keep updating everyone here, what did Singapore just announce?
Wow, there's a lot of stuff. So yes, I think the government just announced a $48 billion package, just right before we went live, and it's broken up into a few components. So if you're talking about the individual component, then I think one of the main announcements that they're going to do is wage matching. Right, so you know how a lot of companies will not be able to survive because they don't really have revenue. So the government is going to come in to support the wages. Right, so for average local workers, will be about 25% of their wages. I think up to 4.6 thousand Sing a month. Right, and for people in the food service sector, with 50%. So that means if you were making 3,000, your employer continues to pay you 1.5, and the government will pay the other 1.5, just to ensure that you are continued to be employed. And for people in the tourism sector, they get 75% of matching, up to 4.6 thousand. So I think these are pretty significant numbers, and it will be extended to 3 quarters. So for 9 months, this will be the arrangement by the government. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think there's a growing gig economy kind of thing. So I'm sure everybody's aware of that. So more and more people are self-employed. So for the self-employed people, they're getting $1,000 every month for 9 months. And they're being paid, I think, like a one-time $3,000 special workfare kind of arrangement if they make below a certain income, right? And they're getting paid to go and reskill themselves also. So I think $10 per hour just to go and learn a new skill, right? And I think these are some of the things. And for uni students who are just graduating and very concerned about the job market, there will be government loan deferment for a year, both the university and the polytechnic. So you don't need to pay your loans, you don't need to pay the interest for a year. right? So provided you're on the government university like loan scheme, right? And yeah, there'll be a one-time ang pao, I think about $900. Right, so the government has been doing this for every year, about $100 to $300 depending on your income. It's more like a GST deferment, goods and services tax, and they're going to do it with $900 this year. So I've not seen the government spend so much money in history. So I think Singapore, it's a very prudent country in terms of fiscal policies. So for the government to put out something like that, I'm actually pretty emotional because emotional in the sense that I'm not sure what's going to happen. Right? For a country that is so prudent, it's like how Germany said they're going to spend fiscal stimulus, and then now you see Singapore as a very prudent country to come in to spend $48 billion, drawing down $17 billion of reserves. That is pretty nuts. Right? So it means that times ahead will be very choppy. And yeah, I think that is the good part is that the government is doing something, and the bad part is that it is kind of like a market signal that things are going to be super complicated because I expect Singapore government to hold things up to a certain standing and not just randomly spend money. Yeah. So for the individual, these are the main things. Of course, there's unemployment benefit for 3 months, $800. Those are the smaller ticket for specific people. But the general market is these are the main things, which is the work income matching, one-time payment. For self-employed, $1,000 loan deferment for university students and graduates. Essentially, you don't need to pay your student loans for a year. I think that those are pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow. Do you qualify for entrepreneur? Do you get 1,000 and however much?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to confirm because I'm merely just following the live. So I was catching the live, which was about an hour odd long, and a lot of things are pointers, so the details are not out yet. So the details are all in his hands. You gotta wait for all the ministry to release the exact details. What is the breakdown? So within an hour, these are some of the stuff that I've got. So it's pretty cool that way. Yeah.
Wow, that is actually, I guess, from everything I've heard, from Canada, US, my sisters in Netherlands and all, I feel like that was the most concise of like, this is exactly what we're gonna do with our money. And not here's $2 trillion. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So I think that is very interesting, and the government did spend a lot of time to talk about the aviation industry, right? So I think the tourism sector is very massively hit. So I think we're experiencing 90% decline in air traffic and air traffic itself. So Singapore is like a global air hub. So 90%. That means it's almost empty lah, right? So shit is at the door, right? SIA just announced, Singapore Airline Groups just announced that they will cut 96% of capacity. That means they're going to ground 96% of all fleets, right? Wow. And that is super crazy. And I think one of the state management kind of capital, which is Temasek Holdings, they will be coming in to do some capital stuff on that. So the government specifically released about $350 million worth of grants for the aviation, travel, and relevant industries that are within that scope. And yeah, I think the government plans to position SIA very strongly. So you should see the government buy into SIA quite a bit because we are expecting consolidation within the sector because most companies will not be able to survive this time period. So government has, although they never say they're going to buy other people, but from the tone of what they say, I'm thinking they're going to come into SIA and buy some equity stake and at the same time fund SIA with the capital to acquire other people and expand business. So yes, you should see Singapore continue to desire to expand to be the aviation hub of Asia. Yeah.
Wow. Steve, what are your thoughts about what the neighbors down south, or I don't know how you guys refer to each other, but what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, our neighbors across the causeway. Definitely. I think these sort of moves are actually really important. I think in having that, that certainty, for that period of time and being able to plan it out with the amount of additional cash flow that you'll be able to have from that. I think it's really concrete to have actually, because so far what else we're seeing in Malaysia, it's steps actually. So even things like the PTPN, which is the education loan deferment, the deferment of tax payments in Malaysia for 2 months actually. All those are good steps. But something that would concretely help cash flow on a longer term basis would be something that I think a lot of countries would be looking at, and it's good that Singapore is actually taking that step as well. Another thing I actually hear from Reggie is, with the duration of that additional financial aid that's actually been given out, you are right in the sense that, a lot of these decisions are made for a countryside, to make sure that the country continues to run, that the people are all going to be okay, that we can actually survive this together. At the same time, yes, it does send bells as well that, how long is it actually gonna take actually before we really see a sense of normalcy? And if you're looking at it in terms of investments, what's actually going to be the impact of it? Yeah. So basically, we're seeing that all countries in the world, GDP forecasts are all being revised. So if one would be really blunt, you would say that all the various GDP forecasts, they are all pretty worthless at this stage actually, with what's actually going to be happening in the months ahead. And you see that some people are eager to start investing, and you for me, I believe that it's a sign of concern when you have people who have never invested, for example, in the stock market, and here they're suddenly saying that, hey, I have money, I want to invest in the stock market. How do I do that actually? But if we're actually looking at it, the key thing that we're looking at is containment. If we're talking about business recovery, you're looking at a very minimum at least 12 months, probably longer than that. And if you're actually looking at market performance, because a lot of movement right now is a lot based on news, and what we are actually seeing is that the worst may not actually be over actually. So there's always actually a strong possibility that we may actually see further significant dip or correction in the markets actually. So it may not be wise to just throw all your funds in at a singular point of time actually. Yeah. So if you do want to invest, you probably want to get your feet wet, know what you're doing, and going on a gradual basis actually.
Yeah.
I think,
Sorry, just wanted to make sure everyone is also aware that this is not, none of us are professional, or we are not professionals. Steve might be, but none of this is actual financial advice, right? This is just
I need to say it's not financial advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's important. I'm gonna crop that into every video that I put up, Chang's voice. But anyway, yes. So I think personally, when I look at it, a lot of the asset in the market now has already reached the kind of correction, like kind of strata. So there's some value around there. But yes, like what you said, do not just jump in if you have not done it before, and just get your feet wet and just kind of hustle your way around. I think that is where I stand. Yeah, as to going forward, I think everything is very uncertain. So nobody really knows what's gonna happen. Yeah.
So I guess since we're on this topic anyway, and I guess kind of what you mentioned at the beginning, Steve, that you've dabbled in a lot of different things, right? From an investment perspective. So given where we are right now, what are you paying more attention to?
I will still be looking at the overall asset allocation. Basically, asset allocation would actually help to reduce volatility by about 90%. Asset allocation also accounts for about 40% of your overall returns actually, rather than the individual investments that you pick. With that said, we are in a kind of interesting time actually, where previously perceived safe havens, things like gold, things like bonds. So when the equity markets go down, traditional viewpoint is that gold bonds will actually tend to move in inverse and actually head up. But what we're seeing is actually all investment classes actually dipping actually, yeah, and even even more so higher risk instruments like crypto, and you see the amount of the downturn that actually occurred in crypto markets. So we're basically seeing that across all asset classes, as that was just that fear and wanting to have that access to liquid cash actually. So the key differentiation is that it's actually because it's actually not really, how to put it, as the traditional recession as we would put it, but it's more of actually a market reaction towards the pandemic that's actually causing these fears that we're seeing. So then the question out there would be, what's the likelihood that we're seeing that this will actually morph into longer term recession and correction actually.
Yeah.
I think about gold, right? I think I totally get what you're trying to say, but there is also another discussion about how correlation goes to 1. That means everything goes down when the market is massively selling off, But at this point in time, you may see gold kind of come back as a safe haven. I'm not too sure because I'm not like a gold expert, but the inverse relationship kind of still holds. It's just not in the moment in time because all the kind of fluctuations has been like 5 to 10% day on day for the past 2 weeks. Yeah, so I think that's just a little bit of my observation. I'm not too sure how it moves, but yeah, that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, I believe we should be heading towards where you would still have that overall asset location, and what we're seeing in a couple of months, just that massive sell downs, also that rush for liquidity, and those who are facing margin calls and forced to just sell for whatever assets they have just to meet those margin calls. So I do believe we should be seeing a bit of more normalcy in terms of overall asset allocation as we actually look ahead actually. And also it was because we actually have been through one of the longest bull runs in history actually. So even on my side, let's say my equities portfolio, over the last 10 years, compounding rate, say, 10, 20%, if you compound that over a period of 10 years, that's actually quite a large sum. So even if I was to sell it at a 30% loss right now, I'm still overall up my capital actually. So, I would still just proceed to sell because, my gains are already there at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. So what are your thoughts? Do you think the market will kind of stabilize going forward because of all these kind of cash infusion, into the market as of now?
I think the cash infusions, what it helps is it gives people a sense of more stability, a sense of that governments are actually doing something about it, and that the sense of fear. Because when fear actually comes in, panic sets in, and people start irrationally hoarding stuff, fighting over toilet paper, stuff like that. But with that said, it really depends how well the containment actually goes in actually the months ahead. Yeah. So only if the containment goes well, countries, people actually step in line and actually work with the governments for the containment. Then only I'll actually be more certain on how return to normalcy in terms of investments.
Cool. Yeah, I laugh at the toilet paper because at first when Singaporeans were hoarding a toilet paper, then all the Johorians were like taking photo, come to Johor, buy toilet paper. And then suddenly when things happen here, everyone also hoard toilet paper. it's quite cute, but yes, sorry.
Yeah, I wonder how this whole toilet paper even began, because that was definitely not my first thing I would be thinking of when I think, I need to survive. Right?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's happening everywhere. Australia, I think everywhere. A lot of Chinese people are just hoarding, probably.
Yeah, and I guess just coming back to how you guys are mentioning everything's dropped. I think the only thing that hasn't dropped is the U.S. dollar, right? That too has gone up, against most currencies 10, 15, 20%, which is crazy in considering that a lot of, I guess, as a whole, the world really works off trade, and to have the US dollar move up that much really just shows just how much people are just trying to go into what they believe is the safe liquid asset to hold.
Yeah, I can agree on that.
Yeah.
I think there was a spike in demand because of liquidation, and everybody is just holding USD. right? So I think the only real alternative in terms of global power now is China, but the Chinese yuan is not liquid at all as an asset, so it's very tough for it to be a safe haven. It's very much centralized control. So I think for a lot of professional fund managers, they're all very concerned about liquidity and safety. Then the market is open, so US dollar still seems like the place to go, although they are printing $2 trillion, and the Fed has just kind of pumped up their balance sheet like crazy. So interesting where these things go, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Steve, any last words from you before we wrap all this up?
I would just say in overall that you should still be conservative in your overall outlook. At the same time, you shouldn't be fearful until it paralyzes you, and or you make decisions which are irrational. You still need to be planning out your personal finances. Everything from your cash flow, your budgeting, your risk management, investments, estate planning. It still needs to be done in a holistic and overall manner, actually. So even though we are socially distant in a way physically, but with the advent of technology, it really helps actually. For example, we're having this live video call, even on markets as well. Things like having circuit breakers in place. All this technology really does make sure that society and people can still continue on with their lives.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today. Really appreciate you to take some time to share with us the importance of cash flow management and the different ways that the government has made it easier for Malaysians to improve their cash flow. So if any of you guys who are watching have any questions, further questions about this, feel free to reach out to Steve directly. The link is in the description. And thanks again for tuning in. Tomorrow we will be having a conversation around investments as a whole. So from shares and stocks to real estate, and I think it'll be primarily focused in the Malaysian market. So tune in for that. All right. Until then, take care.
See ya.
Okay, thanks for you.